I want you to do something for me. Just for a second. Close your eyes. We're going to take a little trip back in time. Picture this. It's 6:30 in the morning, December 1st, 1948. You're walking on Somerton Beach, just south of Adelaide in Australia.
And it's already warm, the sun's up, and you can tell it's going to be one of those scorching hot summer days.
Exactly. And as you're walking, you look down the sand over towards the seawall, and you see something. There's a figure, a man, just lying there.
At first glance, you probably wouldn't think anything of it. I mean, it's not an alarming scene initially.
No, not at all. He's propped up against the wall, his legs are stretched out, his feet are crossed at the ankles. He looks peaceful.
Yeah, you'd just assume he was, sleeping it off. Maybe he had a bit too much the night before and is just catching the morning breeze.
Right. But something makes you walk a little closer. Your curiosity gets the better of you. And that's when it hits you. That's when the illusion shatters.
He isn't sleeping.
He's dead. And here's the question I want to ask you, listening to this right now. If you found a body on a beach, what is the absolute first thing you'd look for?
Identification has to be. A wallet, a license, maybe a letter in a pocket, something. Anything that tells you who this person is.
Right. That's step one. But this is the exact moment where the story of the Somerton man just goes completely off the rails.
Because the police arrive, they search his pockets, and they find, well, basically nothing.
No wallet, no keys, no ID card. But it gets so much weirder. They start examining his clothes. He's dressed immaculately, a full suit and tie, polished shoes, on a beach.
Very out of place.
And when they look at the labels inside the jacket, the shirt, the trousers, every single one has been cut out.
Not just ripped out in a hurry. You can tell they've been painstakingly, carefully removed. Someone sat down with scissors and snipped every last thread.
That detail right there, it changes everything. This isn't just a sad, anonymous death anymore. This is a deliberate mystery.
It suggests that someone, and it could have been the man himself, went to great lengths to make sure he could never be identified.
This is the beginning of the case of the Somerton man, also known as the Tamam Shud case. And for decades, it has been Australia's most profound, most baffling mystery.
And when we say it has everything, we are not exaggerating.
Not at all. We're talking about suspected Cold War spies, jilted lovers, a mysterious nurse, uncrackable secret codes, a rare book of 12th century Persian poetry.
And a suitcase just filled with the strangest collection of clues you can imagine.
For 73 years, this case stumped everyone. Scotland Yard, the FBI, generations of amateur sleuths. It felt completely unsolvable.
But that changed. Very recently, that changed. A combination of just dogged persistence and incredible leaps in forensic DNA science has finally cracked the door open.
So today, we're not just telling a ghost story. We are going to walk through the entire forensic journey, from the police work of 1948, which was, confusing at best,
right,
all the way to the DNA breakthroughs of 2022. We're going to examine why this man was a phantom for so long and who he really was.
And I think our goal here is to really get at the human behind the mystery. For so long, he was just a puzzle, a set of clues. But he was a person who died alone against a seawall, and now we can finally start to understand his story.
Okay, so let's start with the discovery itself. The body was found at 6:30 a.m., but people had actually seen him the night before, right? He was alive then.
Well, they thought he was alive, and that's a key detail. This wasn't a body that just washed ashore. A local jeweler, John Bain Lyons, and his wife were out for a walk on the evening of November 30th.
The night before.
The night before. And they saw a man in that exact spot wearing the exact same clothes. And Lyons described seeing him raise his right arm up and then just let it drop limply.
Which is such a strange detail to remember. At the time, Lyons just thought,
oh, the guy's drunk.
Yeah, he's drunk and he's trying and failing to light a cigarette. If you see someone like that on a beach at night, you give them their space.
You assume they're intoxicated. But when the body was found the next morning, it was in the exact same position. Which strongly implies that when Leon saw him raise that arm, he might have been witnessing the man's final moments, the last throes of death.
Okay, let's dig into the physical evidence on the body, because this is where all the contradictions start piling up immediately.
The coroner's report describes him as being in his 40s, maybe 45. He was in incredible physical shape, athletic.
They focused on his legs, didn't they? Specifically his calves.
They did. The coroner and others who saw the body noted his calf muscles were very high and well developed. And at the time, this led to a very specific theory.
The ballet dancer theory.
The ballet dancer theory. Or maybe a long-distance runner. It was a distinctive physical trait that just fueled all kinds of speculation for years.
But his clothes tell a completely different story. I mean, he's wearing a white shirt, a red and blue tie, brown trousers, a knitted pullover, and a gray and brown double-breasted coat.
He's dressed for a day at the office in, like, Melbourne or London, not for a hot summer evening on a beach in Adelaide. The whole picture is just wrong.
And there are these smaller, even more unsettling details. You mentioned the drunken smoking theory from the witnesses. Well, when the police got there, they found a half-smoked cigarette resting on the collar of his coat. It had fallen out of his mouth and just burned itself out right there.
And there was another unlit cigarette just tucked behind his ear.
Which, to me, suggests he didn't struggle. There was no convulsion, no fight. He just slumped. But the one detail that I know bothered the coroner, and it really bothers me, is the shoes.
Yes, the clean shoes mystery. This is a crucial forensic detail. The man's shoes were recently polished, and police described them as being remarkably clean.
Now, you have to picture the scene. To get to that seawall where he was found, you have to cross a pretty big stretch of soft sand.
There's no way around it. Even if you walk along the waterline where the sand is hard, you still have to cut across the soft, deep sand to get up to the wall.
Your shoes would be covered. They'd be scuffed, sandy, dusty, something.
But his were pristine, and that suggests to a lot of investigators that he didn't walk there himself.
So he was carried.
Either carried there after he was already dead, or perhaps carried there while he was unconscious. It's a very strong indicator that the death, or at least the process of dying, happened somewhere else, and he was positioned on the beach.
Let's move on to his pockets. No wallet, no ID, as we said. But what did they find?
It's a very mundane collection of items. There's an unused rail ticket from Adelaide to Henley Beach, a bus ticket from the city that was used.
And we know he took a bus.
Right, and a couple of combs, some juicy fruit chewing gum, a box of matches. But the cigarettes offer a really fascinating psychological clue.
Okay, what about them?
He had a packet of Army Club cigarettes.
Which was a cheap brand, right? A working-class cigarette.
That's right, but inside the Army Club packet, he didn't have Army Club cigarettes. He had Concetas.
And Concetas were?
A premium, expensive brand, an import.
So why would you put expensive cigarettes into a cheap packet? Is that just, being thrifty, using an old case?
It could be. But in the context of everything else, the missing labels, the clean shoes, it starts to look like a specific kind of deception.
Like tradecraft.
Exactly. It heavily fed into the spy theory. It looks like someone trying to blend in, either hiding the fact that he had money, or maybe he was a man who cared about appearances but was putting up a kind of working class front. You don't want to be the guy smoking the fancy import brand in a local pub. It makes you stand out.
So, to sum up, we have a man with no labels on his clothes, immaculately clean shoes, smoking expensive cigarettes out of a cheap packet, who seems to have died without a struggle. That autopsy must have cleared this all up, right? What was the cause of death?
This is, for me, the most frustrating part of the original 1948 investigation. The pathologist, Dr. John Dwyer, did a full autopsy, and he found all the classic signs of poisoning. The stomach was full of blood, the kidneys and liver were congested and engorged. To any medical professional, that screams poison.
So he swallowed something toxic.
It certainly looks that way, but they tested for everything they could at the time. Cyanide, alkaloids like strychnine, barbiturates, carbolic acid, you name it.
And every test came back negative.
Every single one. No trace of any common poison. And physically, the man was healthy, his heart was in great shape, there was no apparent natural cause of death.
This is where things get really dramatic at the inquest. A very famous professor of physiology gets involved, Sir Cedric Stanton Hicks.
He was a huge deal at the time, and he came to the coroner with a, frankly, terrifying theory.
What was it?
He suggested that the man was killed by a very rare, very specific type of cardiac glycoside, something like digitalis or strophanthine.
They come from plants, right? Foxglove.
Exactly. And the really frightening thing about these particular poisons is how they work in the body. They stop the heart very effectively, but they also break down and decompose incredibly quickly after death.
So if you don't test for them within a very specific, very short window,
they vanish. They leave no chemical trace. It's the perfect, undetectable poison.
Hicks was so concerned about this, wasn't he? He wouldn't even say the names of the drugs out loud in open court.
That's true. It's one of the most cinematic moments of the case. He wrote the two drug names on a little slip of paper and passed it to the coroner. He just referred to them as number 1 and number 2.
Why?
He was genuinely terrified that if the public learned there was an untraceable poison that you could, potentially get from common garden plants, it would set off a wave of copycat murders.
But there's a problem with the poison theory, too, isn't there? I mean, something like digitalis.
Mm-hmm.
It usually makes you violently ill.
It does. It directly stimulates the vomiting center in the brain. You would expect to see convulsions, vomiting, a very messy, violent death. But as we've said, his clothes were neat, the area around him was clean.
Which brings us right back to the clean shoes.
Exactly. If you accept the poison theory, then the most logical conclusion is that the violent part of the poisoning happened somewhere else. He was then cleaned up, dressed, and placed on the beach.
Which means someone was with him. He didn't die alone.
It strongly suggests that.
So the trail goes cold for a while. But then, about 6 weeks later, the police get a major break. A suitcase shows up.
Right. January 14th, 1949. The staff at the Adelaide railway station are doing an inventory, and they realize a brown suitcase has been sitting unclaimed in their cloakroom since November 30th.
The day before the body was found.
The timeline fits perfectly. The thinking is, he arrives in Adelaide, checks his main bag, keeps a few essentials, and heads down to the beach.
So police open it up, and they're probably thinking, okay, here's the passport, case closed.
But instead of a passport, they find, one of the strangest collections of personal effects I've ever heard of.
Let's go through it. What was in there?
Okay, so you've got some clothes, a red checked dressing gown, size 7 slippers, the usual stuff. But then you have the tools.
It's tools, yeah.
There's an electrician's screwdriver, a pair of sharp-pointed scissors, a stenciling brush, the kind used to mark lettering on cargo crates on merchant ships, and a table knife.
But it wasn't just a regular table knife, was it?
No, it had been modified. The end had been cut down and the blade sharpened to a fine point. It looked like a shiv or maybe some kind of specialized tool.
So at the time, the police see the stencil brush, the modified knife,
Yeah.
and they think, what?
For merchant seamen, that was the leading theory. A stencil brush is for marking crates. A modified knife like that could be a useful all-purpose tool on a ship. It fit the profile of a traveler, a man of no fixed address.
But for a little while, they couldn't even be sure the suitcase belonged to him. They needed a forensic link.
And they found it. It was the thread. Tucked away in the bag was a little card of Barber's orange waxed thread. This was a very specific heavy-duty type of thread that wasn't sold in Australia at the time.
An import.
An import. And when they went back and re-examined the dead man's trousers, they found a small repair in the pocket lining, and it had been stitched with that exact same unique orange thread.
That's the smoking gun. It's his bag.
It's his bag, no question.
So now they have his belongings. Do they have a name?
They have a name, but it turns out to be the wrong one. Or at least a misleading one. Okay.
Tucked away on a few items, they found a name. Key Keen was written on a tie. Keen was on a laundry bag. And Keen, spelled without the E, was on a singlet.
So naturally, the police launch a massive search for a missing person named T. Keen.
And they find absolutely no one. No missing T. Keen, or Keen, in Australia, the UK, America, anywhere.
Which led them to a new theory.
The red herring theory. Since every other single label was so carefully removed, why leave these three? The police started to think that the killer, or the man himself, left them there on purpose to throw the investigation off track.
Or the simpler explanation is that he just got them secondhand.
Which is a possibility, sure. But given the high quality of the suit itself, it seemed a little odd. It was just one more contradiction in a case that was already full of them.
All right, so let's move forward in time. The investigation is stalled, but then we get to the clue that gives this case its famous name, and this is pure Hollywood.
It really is. Months have gone by. We're now in June of 1949. A pathologist, Professor John Burton Cleland, is going over the dead man's clothing one more time. And he finds something that the original police search completely missed.
It's kind of amazing they missed it. Sewn deep into the waistband of the trousers was a tiny hidden pocket. A fob pocket for a watch.
And inside.
He reaches in, and he pulls out a tiny, tightly rolled up scrap of paper.
How small are we talking?
Incredibly small. And it had been rolled under so much pressure it was almost like a little pellet. They had to carefully unroll it.
And on this tiny scrap of paper were two words, printed in a very fancy, distinctive font.
Tamam, Shud.
Tamam, Shud, which when translated means...
It's Persian. It translates to, it is ended, or finished.
It is ended.
Yeah.
Found in his secret pocket on a man with no name who died under mysterious circumstances on a beach.
Yeah.
That That is honestly chilling.
It electrified the investigation and the public. This was the big break. They brought in librarians who immediately identified the font. It was from the final page of a book of poetry.
The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam.
That's the one.
Now, for anyone listening who isn't up on their 12th century Persian poetry, we need to talk about the Rubaiyat. Because it's not just any book. It has a very specific vibe.
It really does. In the 1940s, it was an incredibly popular book. But the themes are very, very specific. It's all about seize the day, live life to the fullest, because it's short, and then it's over.
It's very fatalistic. It's about accepting that death is the end, there's nothing after.
Right. So finding the words, "it is ended," in his pocket. Well, the police immediately pivoted. Their new leading theory was suicide. This looked like a final philosophical statement.
So the hunt is on. Not for a person, but for a book. They need to find the specific copy of the Rubaiyat that this scrap was torn from.
And incredibly, they find it. A local man comes forward.
He was given a pseudonym, wasn't he, to protect his identity?
Yes, he was known as Ronald Francis. And he tells police this incredible story. He says that around the time the body was found, back in late November 48, he found a copy of the Rubaiyat in the back of his car.
Just in his car.
He'd left his car unlocked in Glenelg, which is the town right next to Somerton Beach. He found the book in the back footwell, assumed his brother-in-law had left it there, and just tossed it into the glove compartment without thinking.
And he forgot all about it.
He forgot all about it until months later when he saw the police appeal in the newspaper about the Tamam Shud scrap.
And when the police examined the book, he found.
The last page is torn out, and the scrap of paper from the dead man's secret pocket fits the tear perfectly.
It's wild. So the story, as it seems, is the Somerton man has this book. He tears out the final words, "it is ended," puts them in his pocket, walks to a complete stranger's car, throws the book in the back, and then goes to the beach to die.
It makes no logical sense. I mean, why throw the book into a random car? Why not just throw it in the ocean? Why keep the scrap? Was it a memento, a final message?
Or, and here's where the spy theory comes back, was he trying to dispose of evidence but just did it in a really clumsy way?
That's the other side of the coin.
Well, if he was trying to get rid of evidence, he did a terrible job. Because the book had even more secrets. And this leads us to the most tangled, confusing part of this entire case. The spy, the nurse, and the code.
When detectives examined the back cover of that book under ultraviolet light, they found some very faint indentations. It looked like someone had written on a piece of paper resting on the book, and the pressure of the pen had transferred through.
And what did they find?
They found two things. First, a phone number. Second, a jumble of what looked like gibberish letters.
Let's start with the phone number. Who did it belong to?
It led them to a young woman, a nurse named Jessica Thompson. For decades, she was only known by the pseudonym Justin in all the case files.
And here's the kicker. Where did she live?
She lived in Glenelg, just 400 meters from where the body was found on Somerton Beach.
400 meters. That's a 5-minute walk. That cannot be a coincidence.
It seems impossible.
So the police go and knock on her door. "Excuse me, ma'am, do you know this dead man?" What was her reaction?
Her reaction is one of the most debated and analyzed parts of the entire mystery. She was cagey. But when they showed her the plaster cast they'd made of the dead man's face, she completely fell apart.
Define fell apart.
The lead detective wrote in his report that she looked as if she was about to faint. She took one look at it, her eyes went wide, and she looked down at the floor and refused to look at the face again for the rest of the interview.
That is not the reaction of someone who says, "Nope, never seen him before in my life."
No, that's the reaction of someone who has just seen a ghost.
But she stuck to her story. She denied knowing him.
She did. She held her ground. But she did tell them something interesting. She admitted that she once owned a copy of the Rubaiyat and that she had given it as a gift to a man years earlier.
A man named...
An army lieutenant named Alf Boxall. She'd known him in Sydney back in 1945 during the war.
So the police must have thought, this is it. We've got him. The dead man is Alf Boxall.
They were 100% sure they had finally solved it. They put out an alert and they tracked down Alf Boxall. And he was alive and well and working in Sydney.
Oh, man. What a letdown.
A huge deflation for the investigation. And to make it even more confusing, Alf Boxall still had his copy of the Rubaiyat, the one Jessica had given him.
And the last page.
The Tamam Shud page was still there, intact.
So now there are 2 copies of this specific rare edition of the book. One belongs to Alf Boxall, and the other one, the one with the missing page, was found in the car.
Exactly. So the dead man isn't Boxall. But he's somehow connected to this nurse, Jessica, through this very specific shared interest in this book of poetry.
It's an absolute mess. And it gets messier when you look at the other thing written on the back of the book, the code.
Right. 5 lines of capital letters. It starts WRGOABD and so on. It looks like a classic cipher.
So they give it to the code breakers.
They give it to naval intelligence.
Yeah.
And the experts take one look at it and say the frequency of the letters. It doesn't match any known language. The Q's are too frequent. The E's are too rare. It looks like what's called a one-time pad.
Which is a type of spy code, right?
It's the gold standard of spy codes. It's mathematically unbreakable if you don't have the original key that was used to encrypt it.
And this is what really poured gasoline on the whole Soviet spy fire.
Of course. You have a man with no identity who takes care to remove all his labels. He dies of a suspected undetectable poison near a major missile testing range. The Woomera range wasn't far away, and now he's carrying an unbreakable military-grade code.
It all fits the Cold War narrative perfectly.
It does, but there's a problem with it, a big one.
What's that?
If you're a spy and you're carrying a message encrypted with a one-time pad, the absolute last thing you do is write it on the back of a book and then throw that book into a random person's car.
Right. That is just terrible spy.
So you're supposed to burn it, eat it, destroy it, not leave it as evidence. So the alternative theory was that it wasn't a code at all.
It was a mnemonic,
Yeah.
a memory aid.
Yeah. Maybe the first letters of words in a sentence he was trying to remember. The lines of a poem or a list of some kind.
We will come back to the code, because the eventual answer is, well, it's arguably better than a spy thriller. But before we leave this era, we had to talk about one more thing. Robin.
Ah, yes. Jessica, the nurse, had a son. His name was Robin Thompson, born in 1947.
And as Robin grew up, people started noticing things.
Yes. Amateur sleuths who were obsessed with the case noticed that Robin had some very rare physical traits. Specifically, he had hypodontia. He was born missing his 2 upper lateral incisors.
And he had a very specific ear shape.
A very specific ear shape, where the upper hollow, the cymba, is larger than the lower hollow, the cavum. It's a rare genetic trait.
And the Somerton man had these exact same 2 rare traits.
He did. The postmortem photos and the death mask confirmed it. And the statistical probability of 2 unrelated people sharing both those specific traits is, well, it's incredibly low.
So the theory became,
The Somerton man was Robin's father.
it explains everything. He came to Adelaide to find Jessica and his son. Maybe she rejected him, and in his grief, he killed himself on the beach just down the road from her house.
It would explain why she nearly fainted when she saw the death mask. She was looking at the face of her child's father. It was the leading theory for decades. It was romantic, it was tragic, and it seemed to fit all the available evidence.
But it was wrong.
It was completely wrong, but we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Okay, so for 70 years, the case just sits there. The legend of the Somerton man grows. People leave flowers on his anonymous grave. It's a national obsession. But then science marches on, and a professor named Derek Abbott enters the story.
Derek Abbott is really the hero of the modern part of this story. He's a professor at the University of Adelaide, and he became completely obsessed with the case. But he approached it with pure scientific rigor, not just romantic speculation.
And he realized the only way to ever solve this was with DNA.
Exactly. But the body had been in the ground since 1949. Getting an exhumation order is a long, difficult legal process.
It did eventually happen, right, in 2021.
It did, yes. The South Australia police exhumed the body. But Abbott didn't want to wait for the slow wheels of bureaucracy. He had found a loophole, an ace up his sleeve.
The death mask.
The death mask. Remember when they made that plaster cast of the man's face back in 1949? Some of his hairs got trapped in the plaster, about 50 of them. Abbott managed to get his hands on those hairs.
Now, I want to pause here because this is the really incredible science part. From what I understand from, watching crime shows, you usually need the root of the hair to get nuclear DNA, right? The little bulb at the end.
That's the crucial point, yes. For decades, the hair shaft, the long dead part, was considered pretty useless for identification. It contains something called mitochondrial DNA, which you inherit from your mother. It can tell you about deep ancestry, but it can't identify a unique individual.
So how on earth did they do it?
Abbott teamed up with a brilliant forensic genealogist named Colleen Fitzpatrick and a lab in California called Astria Forensics, and they were pioneering a brand new technique.
Which one?
They figured out a way to extract tiny fragmented pieces of nuclear DNA from the keratin protein of the hair shaft itself. It is an incredibly delicate process. It's like trying to reassemble a shredded document that's been soaked in water for 70 years. But they did it.
That is it's mind-blowing. So they got a full DNA profile from a 70-year-old hair with no root.
They did, and once they had that profile, they uploaded it to public genealogy databases like GED Match and Ancestry, then began the painstaking work of building a family tree.
They built a tree of over 4,000 people.
4,000 people, and they were looking for the one place where this mystery man's DNA could fit into the puzzle.
And then, on a Saturday afternoon in July 2022, they found him. The computer spit out a match. After 73 years, we finally have a name.
We do. The 17 man was Carl Charles Webb.
Carl Charles Webb.
Where?
Born in 1905 in Melbourne. So who was he? Was he the Soviet spy? The ballet dancer?
Chuckles. No, he was an electrical engineer and an instrument maker.
An instrument maker. Wait a second. Go back to the suitcase. The stenciling brush and the sharpened knife.
All of a sudden, it makes perfect sense. The police saw stencil brush and thought, cargo crates. But instrument makers use small stencil brushes all the time to paint labels and numbers on dials and panels.
And the sharpened knife.
It wasn't a shiv, it was a precision tool. Probably for cutting gaskets or stripping insulation from wires. The so-called spy kit was just his toolbox.
He was a tradesman, carrying the tools of his trade. That is so wonderfully, beautifully mundane.
It really is.
But what about the Keen labels? The T Keen on the tie. That was the big red herring.
This is my absolute favorite part of the resolution because it's just so human. The researchers dug into Carl Webb's family tree, and they found out he had a brother-in-law.
Don't tell me.
His brother-in-law's name was Thomas Keen.
Like, you're kidding me.
Not at all. They lived near each other in Melbourne. Carl probably just needed a tie or a laundry bag, and his brother-in-law gave him some hand-me-downs. It wasn't a clue left to fool the KGB. He was just wearing his brother-in-law's old clothes.
We've solved the tools. We've solved the clothes. What about the code? The unbreakable cipher that stumped naval intelligence. WRGO Bob D.
Abbott's team looked into Carl Webb's life, his hobbies. He wasn't a spy, but he was a bit of a gambler.
Oh, no.
He loved betting on horse racing.
So the letters.
Abbott's very strong speculation is that the letters are the first letters of horse names. He was scribbling down his bets for the day. For example, WR could have been Windbag and Rack Rack, two popular racehorses at the time.
So the unbreakable Soviet code was just some guy's betting slip that he scribbled on the back of a poetry book.
It seems that way. It even explains the lines that were crossed out. He was probably changing his mind about which horse to back.
That is both hilarious and incredibly tragic all at once. We still have the darker side of this. The poetry, Tamam Shud. Why was Carl Webb on that beach in Adelaide?
This is the why. This is the human story. Abbott's team managed to dig up Carl Webb's divorce papers, and they paint a very sad picture.
He was married.
He was married to a woman named Dorothy Robertson. But by 1947, the marriage had completely fallen apart. She had left him.
And what did the paper say about him?
Dorothy described Carl as being moody and prone to bouts of depression. And, crucially, she said he had a fascination with poetry. He liked to write it himself.
And the theme?
Specifically, poems about death and suicide.
So the Rubaiyat, it wasn't a code book for a spy ring. It was a mirror. He was reading it because he saw himself in its fatalistic philosophy.
Exactly. It is ended. The phrase spoke directly to the state of his life.
And what brought him to Adelaide?
His estranged wife, Dorothy. After she left him, she had moved. She was living in Butte, a small town in South Australia.
He was trying to find her.
It seems almost certain that he traveled to Adelaide to track her down. Maybe he wanted to reconcile, maybe he wanted a confrontation, we'll never know. But for whatever reason, he failed. He either couldn't find her or he simply gave up.
So he checked his suitcase into the station, kept his tools, bought a ticket to the beach, and that was it.
That seems to be the tragic story.
Now wait. We have to address the biggest red herring of them all. Jestin, the nurse, the fainting, the unbelievable coincidence of her son Robin's ears and teeth.
The DNA answered that question definitively.
Wow.
Carl Webb was not the father of Robin Thompson. There is no genetic link between them whatsoever.
So the hypodontia, the ear shape.
It was just a staggering 1 in a million coincidence, a roll of the genetic dice that sent investigators down the wrong path for 50 years. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes coincidences are just that, coincidences.
But her reaction, the fainting spell, she clearly recognized him.
Maybe. Or maybe you just have to put yourself in her shoes in 1948. She's a respectable woman, maybe with a new life. Suddenly, the police are on her doorstep, asking about a dead body found nearby and dredging up the name of an old boyfriend, Alf Boxall. She was probably just terrified of being dragged into a scandal.
That's true. Or is it still possible she knew Carl Webb in some other context? That remains a mystery.
It does. It's the one major loose thread that the DNA can't tie up. We don't know if they ever met.
So this brings us to what's still unanswered. Because even with a name, Carl Webb, we still don't actually know how he died.
We don't. The cause of death is still officially a mystery. Was it suicide by a fast-acting poison like digitalis? Probably. The Tamam Shud slip certainly suggests intent, but the lack of vomiting or convulsions is still a medical puzzle.
And what about the police? Is the case officially closed now?
Not quite. The South Australia police have said they are cautiously optimistic about Abbott's findings, but they are very methodical. They're doing their own independent DNA verification using the samples from the 2021 exhumation. So legally, on the books, he is still the Somerton man. But for all intents and purposes, he's Carl.
Knowing his name, it just changes the whole feel of the story for me. He went from being this enigmatic, unknowable super spy to being a heartbroken electrical engineer.
It grounds the story in a very real, very sad humanity. He wasn't a character in a spy novel. He was just a guy whose life had fallen apart. He lost his wife, he lost his way, and he found solace in dark poetry.
It makes you think about all the stories we project onto strangers. For 70 years, he was a canvas for all our Cold War fears and our romantic fantasies. But in the end, he was just a man in pain.
And in some ways, that's a much more haunting story than the one about the spy.
So I want to leave everyone listening with one final thought to mull over. Carl Webb spent his last hours on Earth methodically erasing his own identity. He cut the labels from his clothes, he left no ID, he created this perfect silent mystery by using this incredible 21st century science to find his name and tell his sad story. Have we finally solved his puzzle, or have we ruined his final masterpiece?
That is the great ethical question of this kind of work, isn't it? The dead don't get a say in whether they want their privacy invaded. We've unearthed all his secrets.
So we want to know what you think. Do you buy the horse racing theory for the code, or are you still holding out hope it was something more? And does knowing his name was Carl Webb make the story more tragic or somehow less mysterious for you?
I'm all in on the horses. Poor Carl probably lost a fortune on a horse named Windbag.
I think that's a pretty safe bet. Thank you for joining us for this look into the long, strange life and death of Carl Webb. We'll see you next time.
Tamam, Shud.